everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another awesome episode of On the Throttle with Jacqui and my buddy Josh over here. We've got this week's exciting news and stories and things going on out here in the world of motorcycling and in the magical, mysterious world of the internets. Josh has a story about some exciting things that are going on out here on the interwebs this week. And I have got some rad new motorcycles and some top secret spy photos of some bikes that may or may not be coming your way. So let's get on with today's show. Josh, what do you got going on for today?
So there's two things. Have you ever wanted to go racing and you didn't want to put leathers on? We have a way for you to do that now. And second off, there's now a single husky out there. So, and I'm not talking about dogs.
I mean, I would stop you if you didn't want to talk about dogs, to be honest with you. I wouldn't stop you for that one. But I have a feeling you're talking about the brand Husqvarna and one of their new machines that they might have coming our way. So yes, we were talking a little bit before the show, Josh and I, about how this time of year, while it can kind of be a little bit slow news-wise, it is absolutely jam-packed full of new bikes and things that are hitting the internet and hitting dealerships. So there is plenty of news coming your way. So make sure you go ahead, hit that notifications on and subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss anything exciting news going on out here. My first story for today is talking about a couple of beautiful bikes that just landed on the internet this past week and made their way all around the place. And that is some new machines from the folks over at Indian Motorcycle. The bike on your screen is Indian Motorcycle Scout, that great looking, smaller framed, a little bit of a smaller package type bike from the folks over at Indian Motorcycle. However, as you can see, it's definitely got a little bit more going on this season. And that is because this is a new kind of version of the Scout. This is the 2022 Scout Rogue and Scout Rogue 60. This bike is going to have a 19-inch front wheel. This has a little bit different color options and tank badges. And the rad thing is that this bike in the larger displacement, which is the Scout Rogue, it starts at $11,499. The Scout 60, which is the slightly smaller displacement, is less than $10,000. These beautiful bikes, check them out. It's got really great, that liquid cooled engine that they're known for. It just puts out a ton of power. It is going to be a bit of a, like I said, 19-inch front wheel. It also has that front fairing on the front. The cylinder heads are blackened out and contrast cut. Really just a great looking, super sharp bike, very aggressive. I love that little mini fairing on the front. I love the picture on your screen right now with that big cast wheel up front, this murdered out all black bike, but I also am a sucker for that blue right behind it. So these have been going around the internet a little bit of an update, a little bit of a change up for the folks over at Indian Motorcycle with this Scout bike. I've had the good fortune of riding this machine. Just a really rad, like I said, really good power to weight ratio, just nice and light and nimble, smaller frame. Being 5'2", I am here for it. What do you think about these new Indian Scout Rogues, Josh?
Indian's done a great job in my book of doing these evolutionary things. And I mean, I think they've figured out how to get some of that V-twin crowd without making that traditional old V-twin. Because let's face it, like you said, the power out of these things is great. And it's that electric motor type torque curve of just power everywhere. You've got to be really dumb to be in the wrong gear in these bikes. I mean, we've all had dumb moments, I guess I would say, yeah. But it's just power everywhere. And once again, I'm with you. That murdered outlook, 2 thumbs up for sure.
Yeah, super sharp, and it's just a really great, very approachable bike, especially with that price tag. So bravo to the folks over at Indian Motorcycle for adding a couple more smaller package bikes to their lineup of their machines that they've got going on over there, as well as just a year or two ago, they released that redesigned Chief, another very, very cool, but with the bigger engine. That has got the 116 Thunderstroke, if I remember correctly, but that is in a little bit smaller frame size. So another really neat bike coming from the folks over at Indian that came out a couple of years ago. But that's my first story for today. And what's your first story for today, Josh?
So we all like racing. I mean, we talk about different forms of it and everything like that. AMA has now partnered with Init Esports for the first sanctioned motorcycle e-events. So everyone thinks esports and they think gamer. Great. Jacqui, I know you think back to your days of playing Excite Bike, where I played it also, and you're like, great, it's the D-pad, and there's a gas and a brake and two buttons. These things are so much more different than so much have come so far in the last years in that. So just to give you an example of how good these can be, I actually, behind me there, I have a racing simulator that I do for iRacing. That is the automotive side of esports stuff. And I tell you what, is we all joke about it. Racing is, we all know this, whether it's cars, motorcycles, pedal bicycles, whatever it is, it could be a push scooter. Racing is about cubic dollars, not cubic inches. Cubic dollars is what it takes to win in racing. We've all joked that the e-racing, the esports type of stuff is literally, it is about 40% of the fun of racing. It is also about 2% of the budget and about 3% of the amount of time. So when it comes to the fun and smiles per dollar an hour that you invest in it, it's tough to beat some of these esports. Now, that's not to say you do not get the same feeling of $170 down the back straight someplace. You don't get that. But once again, it is a great skill set. And this is an area that's moving forward, because when you look at esports in that, Microsoft, I believe you've heard of that company possibly, just bought Activision, a huge gaming company. So this is something that's moving forward. For me, that's someone that's done simulations like this. They're pretty good. I'm excited to see how this program works out. Some great racers do it. It's funny, I've seen online, Max Verstappen does this all the time. You will find a ton of NASCAR guys in here. If you want to go old school, Rubens Barrichello even still does this all the time. So, you could be racing against, we've mentioned Troy Bayliss. You could be racing against Marquez. You could be racing against Valentino Rossi in one of these games, which is absolutely awesome. To me, I think this is a win. What are your thoughts, Jacqui? Are you going to be buying a simulator here soon?
Well, I definitely agree with you what you were saying about the growth potential in this space and with
Yeah.
this type of power sports gaming, power sports event, kind of
Yeah.
mindset. Because especially during COVID, I think it really blew the lid off of this category because there was no racing. And MotoGP even tapped into this crowd, tapped into this community, and started hosting their own live online e-racing series, having the actual pros from MotoGP race the motorcycles in the MotoGP game, and then they showed it and streamed it all on their platform just to keep all
Yep.
of their fans engaged with with what they're doing, with their teams, with their the riders that they love, and with the culture and with the community. So I think that there's huge growth here. I know that this is a huge thing. I know there's a ton of cash floating around in this space right now, and who's to say that maybe it's just not the next, for years and years now in wintertime when it's cold and snowy here, even though we only get like 2 inches of snow, but I consider that snowy here. When it gets cold and snowy here and I can't go ride motorcycles, perhaps my generation and your generation would turn on or put in, on any Sunday or from dusk to glory, and we watch movies and we watch videos. And now the next upcoming generation instead plays games dedicated to these same activities and these same power sports, kind of ideas and events. So I think that, clearly it's here to stay. This is not a fad. This is real. This is the now out here in this magical world of the interwebs. But all that being said, am I going to buy into it? No, I'm not. I'm not that guy. I'm not a big gamer. Not, never mind my gaming headset. This is just to be able to talk to you and hear you really well. And hear your beautiful voice, Josh, and all of your details and all of your stories. But no, that is that this isn't particularly my cup of tea. But I do know that it's a very cool, neat thing, and I do like watching it. I just don't really participate in it. But that's just happens to be me.
It's funny you say that, because I know I remember MotoGP doing that. IMSA did that. IndyCar did that. Everyone went to these platforms and said, hey. And there was a time, actually, I came across something streaming where I was like, oh, interesting, right? That's the same game that I play. So it's something great for fans to get into. And it's a way for fans to, like you said, connect with some of these pros too. And that's what it's all about.
Absolutely, right? It's all about this community out here, whether we're on our
Yep.
couch enjoying it or if we're going live to the races or if we're out there racing and banging bars ourselves. It's all about, this community and this space of us all
Exactly.
enjoying this, being passionate about these sports together. So, thank you for that rad story. I'm really curious to see where that goes. And like I said, I do genuinely like watching that kind of stuff. So I'll keep an eye out for it for
Oh
sure.
yeah.
Speaking of modern and the future, the mysterious world of the
Big time.
internet and electronic things out here. This week was the very first big reveal, press launch for the folks over at BMW with their much anticipated e-scooter, and I am so in love with this thing. I can barely even talk about it. It is super weird, it is kind of ugly, it's boxy. I love it. I love everything about it. I love weird stuff. This is going to be BMW's new CEO 4. They did a couple. There's been write-ups all over the place. This was a European launch. Not everybody is traveling yet, but this has been burning down the internet a little bit because the response from this was so fantastic. The writers and journalists that got the chance to go were so pleasantly shocked and had such a ball on this electronic maxi scooter from the folks at BMW. So, just a couple of quick quotes out of it. Even in silence, there's still good fun to be had on the CEO 4, as it is hilariously quick, full power launches at intersections. BMW claims it'll do a 0 to 31 mile per hour in 2.6 seconds. Frankly, they had no clue what to think of the spec. The claimed torque is over 45 pounds per foot, which isn't a huge number, but is instantly available. And it's a little confusing when you're used to internal combustion engines. On top of that, according to BMW, the O4 and CEO4 means to expect similar performance to what a 400cc internal combustion engine would provide. That's how they're kind of making that equivalency. So this had just really incredibly good reviews. I love the styling and design of it. It's on purpose. There's a lot of conversations and interviews because this was a press launch. So they brought all the big dogs from BMW and the engineers and designers out, and they were commenting on how, as opposed to an internal combustion engine where you have these limitations, you have the engine in the middle, you have the exhaust that runs along one side of it or along both sides of it. It can be very limiting as to what you can do because this is battery operated as opposed to ICE. There's it kind of blows the lid off of it and you can do whatever you want. Traditional scooters, the storage is in the back of the machine. This time it's in the very middle of this machine because there's not a great big hot engine there. You can put whatever you want in the middle. You can do whatever you want. They went with a really neat solid wheel and they went with that really rad like solo seat. I think this is just super cool. I am clearly a nerd fan for this, Josh. What do you think about this rad electronic scooter from the folks at BMW?
I am surprised that you did not somehow get to the launch and steal one.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
And I mean, I get it. It is very BMW in its design.
Yeah.
And I mean, it screams German. It's utilitarian, which is exactly what someone who wants to buy this scooter wants, because they want it to go to the grocery store. They want it to do the stuff in the city. This is not a highway cruiser. This is to get you around town and to get all your errands done. And with, you said 47 foot-pounds of torque.
Yeah. I mean,
And I
that's a
mean,
lot. That's pretty, yeah.
for anything electric, anyone that's ridden anything electric, that is available at nothing, at 0 RPM. As soon as you give it the electrons, all 47 foot-pounds of torque are there. To me, I would be doing my best to figure out a way, if there's traction control on the back end of that thing, to turn that off and just ride around giggling like a little kid that just got a piece of
Yeah.
candy, hooning with
Oh, yeah.
that back tire. I mean, I'd keep a couple of spare back tires just because.
Yeah, I would shred the rear wheel right off of this bad dog for sure. I just think it's really neat. And again, they had this incredible launch in Barcelona. There's tons of beautiful scenic photos of it. I could have put 25 beautiful photos of Barcelona up, but I just wanted to show you this in all of its glory, all of its boxy utilitarianness. I am here for it. I think it's absolutely wonderful. I cannot wait to ride this for myself. And this is just one of the many machines that are going to be popping up this spring because it is officially new bike season. And speaking of, I know you also have some new bikes to talk about.
Correct. So Husky, on the success of the Vitpilin and the Svartpilen, that is how we're going to say that, correct? So on the
Yes.
success of the bigger versions of those, they now have the 401 versions, which is using a 373cc single. It has a trellis frame like its big brother, and then it has full ABS, 9.5 liters of fuel, and they only weigh 151 kilograms, which carry the one is 332 pounds. What are your thoughts here, Jacqui?
Oh, I am super over the moon for this bike. I think I love this design. I love, again, look at how modern, look at how fresh, look at how boxy this is. Oh, the Europeans just absolutely clobber in this space with really like progressive types of design and styling cues. I think this is wonderful. I've had the good fortune of seeing these bikes in real life. I think they're just beautiful. But again, I can see how this is very polarizing. Husqvarna is a legacy brand. Husqvarna's been around a very, very long time, and they're not really known for doing these types of really like modern street bikes. I think when people hear Husqvarna, they immediately think dirt bike, and they kind of forget that there's a street bike element to what they do too.
I totally agree with you on that. And Husky's really starting to grow this market, which I think is awesome. And to me, the fact is that they've got this bike that can look great. This is a smaller bike that anyone can ride, but you're not going to get bored of. It's a 373 single, but once again, it's not a 250. It's not a 125. So this is a bike that's not intimidating, but you're not going to outgrow either. So to me, that's what I love about what Husky's doing with this. Like you said, the design being a little bit polarizing. It looks Nordic. I mean, that's the only way to put it. It looks Nordic. If you remember old Saabs, same thing. They had
Yeah,
an old Volvos. They all had distinct looks to them. This does,
yeah.
but I think it's. I mean, they're gorgeous. I love them. I mean, I'd like to rock both of them, and maybe we could race the BMW scooter.
Definitely. And you're not wrong. This looks like it just got scooped right up off of the floor of an IKEA. It's got that total like
Yes.
Swedish northern design vibe to it for sure. I'm about ready to take this thing apart with an Allen key. So anywho,
I love it.
speaking of new bikes and small displacement, there was some spy photos that have been out on the internet this past week as well. And I mean, this is all over the place. This was on some European websites that I like to go look at. This was on American websites. This took place, however, over these photos are coming from Spain as well. Notice a trend from today's stories. The past two bikes were pictured in Spain. So anyway, it's beautiful and warm there. That's why they're there. Anywho, so these are going to be spy photos. Again, it doesn't have badging on it, quote unquote, but you can obviously see who this is. This is Triumph Motorcycles. Years ago, there was a rumor that the Triumph team was going to start getting back into some smaller displacement bikes because there was a rumor going on that that what they really wanted to get into was a bit of like a coaching and training program here in the United States. A lot of folks may or may not realize that, programs like at the MSF program, they work in partnership with OEMs. The OEMs supply motorcycles for super, super, super duper reasonable price to these training programs. When you're training new people to ride motorcycles, what do they instinctively kind of are drawn to or fall in love with? It's the one that they just got done doing a class on, right? So OEMs are really incredibly smart to get into bed with these training programs and provide smaller displacement bikes because it's kind of like a surefire sale. Like you go and instead of race on Sunday, sell on Monday, it's train on Sunday and buy on Monday, just about. So anyway, there was a rumor about that swirling around for years. It fizzled out. Nothing came of it until the past handful of years. Triumph climbed into bed with massive, massive, massive Indian motorcycle manufacturer, and not Indian motorcycle like the beginning of the show, but Indian as in India motorcycle manufacturer Bajaj. They climbed into bed together. Bajaj is absolutely one of the largest motorcycle manufacturers globally. So this was a really important partnership for several different reasons. For Triumph to be able to go overseas and manufacture motorcycles in India, they're going to be able to dodge a huge tax that would normally get levied on any motorcycles that they would be making in England and be shipping over to India. That's how it works globally. Any bikes that come from anywhere outside countries, there's always a tax thrown on top of them. However, the way that they get around that, and not Triumph's not unique in this. Harley Davidson does this as well. They build motorcycles in Asia for Asia market, is that they build bikes in Asia and they sell them to Asia market. Asia market is predominantly smaller displacement. So you see where I'm headed with this, right? So these spy photos were leaked. Nobody really can tell what the displacement is, but this is clearly a single cylinder. It is obviously a little bit smaller. The guesstimation online and the speculation is maybe like a 350 to 500 cc machine. Again, there are no hard, hot, and heavy details for this, but I think that this is really interesting. Now, here's where it gets particularly interesting. Is that bike going to come to the United States? What do you think, Josh?
It's interesting, and I mean, I love the concept in that. When you look at some of the details here, I mean, that screams smaller displacement. Okay, and also more economical. We've got single rotor up here on the front. It's the single exhaust. There's some sort of looks like water cooling to it. So there's these little hints with it that say, okay, this kind of gives us some general direction with it. In that, much like the Huskies we just talked about, I think there's two great things with this. First off, there's this section of bikes that we've talked about that people can get on. It used to be the beginner bike was a bike that you had for 2 months, and then you're like, this thing is slow. You kicked it to the curb.
Yeah.
Think of the EX250, even some of the EX500s, et cetera, et cetera. There's now this sweet spot, like you said, 300 to 500 cc's, where people can get on them and go, and they're going to enjoy them for years to come. On top of that, so it opens up a whole nother market for them. And on top of that, like you said, that Asian market, the access to that, I think obviously it's shown. So many bikes are sold there. You got to be there. To me, it looks great. I would love to see it. I think it would be a win for Triumph all the way around.
Plus, there's also the thought process of them trying to go head to head with a couple of their other rival companies and legacy brands like Royal Enfield. Royal Enfield also making motorcycles in India. India is their largest market. Royal Enfield is the largest, if not one of the largest, motorcycle producers globally as well. So they're just making and cranking out tons and tons and tons of bikes. And a lot of them happen to be in this smaller displacement range. This 350 to 500 kind of category is kind of where they live. That's kind of their sweet spot. So there's a thought process that this Triumph might be staying in India to go head to head with Royal Enfield. Maybe it's going to come to this country or to the UK to do battle head to head with the rebooted Yava that's going to be coming from Mahindra, also the 350 Meteor that's coming from Royal Enfield. So there's a lot of question marks out here about what exactly this bike is for. All I can say is for my own experience several years ago, knowing the folks that were in bed with Triumph at that time, the thought process was bringing these bikes to this country specifically to be literally training type bikes and really get that entry level beginning consumer to help grow them throughout the Triumph lineup. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with these bikes, but this is definitely very curious, very interesting news. These bikes look very close to the home stretch. They look like they're pretty ready to rock and roll.
Yep.
Even though they don't have badges and things on them. That's not normal. It's not uncommon for them to do that when they're taking
Correct.
these bikes out and testing them, to keep them disguised and keep them under wraps a little bit. But this looks pretty thought out and pretty fleshed out. As you already noticed, it's liquid cooled, or it appears to have some sort of liquid cooled or radiator in the front, tank shape. It all looks really, really put together. So I wouldn't be surprised if it starts showing up in a real live actual way, whether it's just overseas or it actually makes it to this country. I would expect to see this bike in the next handful of months, but we will all have to wait and see. And you know that the minute we hear about it, we're going to be bringing it to you here on the Throttle. We've always got our finger on the pulse out here, bringing you all of the exciting and all of the newest news going on in motorcycling. So make sure you stick around. You are not going to want to miss it. Thanks again for clicking, liking, sharing, watching all of these videos. Make sure you come on back next week. We'll have another great show for you. Thanks again for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week.